Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. Fearful of the problems the spirit automaton might cause upon awakening, Bai Xiaochun worked as quickly as possible. Whether it was in terms of speed or his powers of regeneration, the sovereign flesh he had consumed had helped him to advance by leaps and bounds. He put on a great showing and quickly reached the 78th level. As soon as he entered that level, he felt an intense pressure weighing down on him. There was also a sensation of potential danger that caused him to immediately back up and send his divine sense out to check the area. Rumbling sounds could be heard as he was immediately able to see the entire area in his mind. It was a very strange world indeed. There was no sky or no land, only an endless void, and a stone dais. In front of the stone dais was a huge wooden marionette. It was fully 300 meters tall, and as round as a sphere. It also had a face painted onto its head. Although Bai Xiaochun couldn't be certain why, he was sure that there was a very strange aura in this place. After studying it for a moment, his attention was continuously drawn to the marionette. Almost as soon as he looked at it closely, it opened its eyes, which glowed with mysterious light. Then, it leapt nimbly into the air, and began to head directly toward him. All I did was look at him. Bai Xiaochun thought. Alarmed, he fell back, but the marionette was shockingly quick. All it took was a moment for it to be right in front of him. Seeing that he couldn't evade it, he decided that since he had recently improved his fleshly body power, he might as well just start fighting. Clenching his right hand into a fist, he punched out at the marionette. It seemed like an ordinary strike, but considering the level of his battle prowess, that fist strike alone would be enough to shove someone in the early celestial realm away from him, coughing up blood the entire time. Although it might not kill an opponent like that, it would at least inflict injuries. Unexpectedly, the seemingly tough marionette actually couldn't stand up to a single punch and exploded. Shockingly, the shockwave from its explosion was stronger than its own battle prowess, sending out heaven-shaking, earth-shattering fluctuations in all directions. To Bai Xiaochun, it felt like a wild beast attacking him with full ferocity. Rumbling sounds could be heard everywhere as he tumbled back a few dozen meters before coming to a stop, gasping for breath. What a strong backlash. Looking up, he realized that another powerful aura had erupted from the spot where the marionette had exploded. At that point, he realized that what had exploded was only something like an exterior shell. There was now another marionette standing there, a bit smaller than the one from before. This marionette's aura was stronger, and just like the other one, it attacked the moment it saw him. From the look in its eyes, it seemed like it wouldn't stop fighting until he was dead, or it was destroyed. Frowning, he chose not to back up, but instead, to attack with a fist strike. However, after unleashing the strike, he immediately fell back. Unfortunately, no matter how quickly he backed up, the shockwave from the exploding marionette still hit him, causing his chi and blood to vibrate painfully. A moment later, an even more powerful aura arose, and he saw another, smaller marionette. At that point, his eyes went wide. Will it ever end? He thought, shocked. Presumably, the way to pass the level was to destroy the entire marionette, including all of the layers that made it up. What a weird level. If the spirit automaton is around, that would mean I'm in great danger. With that, he sent some more divine sense out to scan the area. I bet he is awake. But based on the timing, he should still be asleep. By now, his power over the damaged fan had reached the point where he could use it to track down the spirit automaton. He was already starting to get anxious, but now was not the time for delays. He should either evacuate the level and accept defeat, or do his best to pass it as quickly as possible. Back when he was in Misty Sea Prefecture, he would probably have selected the former. But now he was in the Vile Emperor City, in a position of potential danger. The sooner he got the rewards he sought, the faster he would improve his cultivation base. And if he could pass all the levels and become the true owner of the fan, then he would have a much more stable position in Vile Emperor City. His biggest hope and anticipation was that he would eventually be strong enough to take on Archeans. That way, if he was ever forced into a fight, he would be able to hold his own. Screw it, I'm gonna keep trying. If I can't make it work, then I'll just leave. Gritting his teeth, he shot toward the marionette. When he slammed into it, it exploded, and yet again he was hit with a backlash. However, he didn't attempt to do anything to avoid it. Doing so was virtually impossible. And apparently, this level tested one's ability to withstand backlashes. Blood oozed out of the corners of his mouth, but his powers of regeneration immediately went to work. Eyes bloodshot, he immediately set upon the next, smaller marionette. With every marionette he killed, another would arise, smaller than before. The cycle repeated itself over and over. Eventually, he had unleashed 10 fist strikes. Each one had destroyed a marionette and unleashed a backlash attack. The backlashes were getting stronger and stronger, to the point where even his undying codex couldn't keep up. Considering my powers of regeneration, it seems to me that even if I was in the late celestial realm, I would still have problems. Don't tell me I need to be in the Great Circle to pass. Bai Xiaochun refused to believe that the 78th level would actually be that hard. The next marionette that he destroyed caused a backlash that sent blood spraying out of his mouth. And the marionette which appeared this time looked different from before. It was only the size of a palm, and was pure gold. It radiated the aura of the mid-celestial realm, and had speed that completely defied imagination. It vanished, reappeared right in front of Bai Xiaochun's chest, and then slammed into him. Before he could even react, he was sent flying hundreds of meters backward. Blood sprayed out of his mouth, and even as he struggled to his feet, a streak of golden light slammed into him. Then again, and again. He was really starting to get mad now. Complete and utter bullying. This was his first time encountering an opponent with the same cultivation base as himself, but that he couldn't hit because of their incredible speed. Even as the golden streak of light closed in again, he took a deep breath, causing all of his skin to turn the color of blood. A blood mist also spread out from him, into which he seemingly merged. Within the mist, his eyes gleamed with sinister coldness, and he spoke in a bloodthirsty voice, "Godkiller." The Godkiller technique was finally being used again. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the golden light neared the blood-colored mist. In the blink of an eye, blood-colored light and golden light were intersecting in a shocking display of speed. Booms rang out constantly, until the blood mist finally surrounded the golden light. A moment later, there was an explosion, and then a massive backlash that surpassed anything from before. The blood mist also collapsed, spreading out into the surrounding void. After about 10 breaths of time, everything had gone calm again, and the blood mist formed back to reveal an ashen-faced Bai Xiaochun. "Whoa," he said, blood oozing out of his mouth. At that point, he began to fade away as he left the 78th level. Although he had passed it successfully, he had received a significant injury in the process. From that, he could tell that the levels from this point on were going to be extremely difficult. It took some rest, but Bai Xiaochun recovered well. After thinking back to how hard the 78th level had been, he couldn't help but sigh. I can tell it's getting harder and harder. It's a good thing that little automaton wasn't around, otherwise things would have really been hopeless. I have to be very careful from here on out. I can't give the little automaton any advantage in our battle of wits and strength. Sighing, he decided not to challenge any more levels. Not long after he left, the spirit automaton woke up. Upon discovering that Bai Xiaochun was getting closer and closer to the 80th level, he felt beyond delighted. Back in the level with the leaves, he had paid a steep price in his attempt to defeat Bai Xiaochun. In fact, as a result, the difficulty in the following levels had been reduced. That having been said, the difficulty reduction hadn't been that dramatic. Therefore, Bai Xiaochun's rapid progress was a bit of a surprise. No, wait, I need to make some more adjustments. Damn it, alright, I know. I'll completely reduce the difficulty of the 100th level and redistribute it to earlier levels. That way, I can definitely stop this damned Bai Xiaochun. The spirit automaton was acting a bit crazily. But he was really worried about Bai Xiaochun making progress. Therefore, he went through with his plan to reduce the difficulty of the final level as far down as it would go. Meanwhile, Bai Xiaochun was back in his private chamber in the embassy in Vile Emperor City. After opening his eyes, he produced a blue pill bottle from his bag of holding. There were no medicinal pills inside, only a medicinal liquid, 8 drops in total. This was the reward he had acquired from the 78th level. Each drop of that liquid was comparable to an immortal pill, or perhaps, was even more effective. All in all, it was perfect for use in the mid-celestial realm. Although the 78th level had been difficult, the rewards were significant. As a grandmaster in the Tao of medicine, he could tell that this medicinal liquid was extraordinary, to the point where he wasn't even sure how it had been created. However, after some analysis, he confirmed that all of the ingredients were legendary in the eternal immortal domains, and were all considered to be immortal grasses. There was only one ingredient, spirit dragon horn, a precious material of heaven and earth, that was relatively common in the eternal immortal domains. Even still, it was astronomically expensive. Bai Xiaochun had seen a specimen in Saint Emperor City, and knew that even celestials who qualified to acquire it could only do so with great difficulty. It was all worth it, he thought, tilting the bottle up to let a single drop of the fluid out onto his tongue. It dissolved instantly, giving rise to a searing heat that exploded through his entire body. His cultivation base immediately began to rotate rapidly as the nutritious agents in the medicinal liquid coursed through his energy passageways. As he cultivated, time passed. Because his calculations indicated that the spirit automaton was awake, he didn't go back to the damaged fan. He spent all of his time in cultivation, trying to improve his cultivation base. The 9 drops of medicinal liquid turned out to be even more powerful than he had imagined. After absorbing all of them, he found that he had achieved significant progress. He was now very close to the late celestial realm, and almost didn't feel like he was in the mid-celestial realm anymore. And he hadn't even used his celestial pill yet. He had already performed spirit enhancements on it, and was preparing to use it at the last possible moment to improve his chances of breaking through. Most people would be completely shocked by the progress he was making, and would find it difficult to believe. After all, there were only 12 celestials in the eternal immortal domains, and many of them would spend years and years, and rely on all varieties of good fortune, just to make a little bit of progress. Bai Xiaochun was the only one who could advance in the way he was. After all, he was using the legacy rewards left behind in the heaven-shaking, earth-shattering treasured item of a sovereign. Because of that treasure, his cultivation was advancing rapidly, and seemingly without pause. Even as he was wrapped up in this process of rapid progress, a friend came to visit. It was none other than Big Fatty Zhang. After coming to Vile Emperor City, Bai Xiaochun had asked his subordinates about Big Fatty Zhang, who he knew had a very unique position in the dynasty. However, they had informed him that Big Fatty Zhang was out on a mission. 2 months later, Big Fatty Zhang returned. After hearing that Bai Xiaochun was in the city, he rushed over to the embassy at the earliest opportunity. When Bai Xiaochun got the news, he hurried out of his private chamber and headed to the main hall, where a tall, lanky person stood waiting for him. The person's silhouette looked unfamiliar, but when he turned to look at Bai Xiaochun felt shaken to the core. Despite how different he looked, his facial features were the same, and Bai Xiaochun couldn't hold back from rushing forward to embrace him. Eldest brother, Big Fatty Zhang seemed just as excited as Bai Xiaochun, and returned the embrace. Xiaochun, as they looked each other up and down, they thought back to all the memories they shared. From the ovens in the Spirit Stream sect to the river-defying sect, from the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect to the battle on Ghost Mother's battleship. And then to the point when they were separated by an entire world. Xiaochun, I thought I was never going to be able to see you again. Xiaochun, do you remember back on the Heavenspan Sea when I told you about that dream of mine? 1. Well, my life really has been like a hallucination. In fact, for years, I wondered if maybe I was stuck in a dream. The world I had lived in was the body of an enormous giant. Back then, I could hardly believe it, and then I heard that the Heavenspan realm had been destroyed. By this point, tears were streaming down Big Fatty Zhang's cheeks. He had many things to say, and so much to recount regarding the difficulties he had faced through the years. To him, Bai Xiaochun was not just a junior brother, but also a dear friend and brother. Bai Xiaochun's heart trembled as he listened to Big Fatty Zhang. He thought about the ovens, and how many years had passed since then, and it made this reunion even more memorable. They sat there for a long time, reminiscing and talking about the things which had occurred since they were separated. Considering Bai Xiaochun's position, he had his subordinates bring some alcohol for them to enjoy, and then activated the embassy's spell formations, ensuring that no divine sense would be able to intrude on them. At the time, I had no idea that the Ghost Galleon would be taking such a momentous journey. It brought me to this strange land, to this strange city, and to these strange people. Xiaochun, you have no idea how useless I was back then. Big Fatty Zhang bitterly raised his alcohol jug up and took a drink. Bai Xiaochun joined him. Eldest brother, he said, you came here before anyone else, so you don't know everything that went on. The river-defying sect is gone. The wildlands are gone. Everything's gone. My apprentice Hauer is gone. The gravekeeper is gone. The entire world is gone. The more he talked, the bleaker he sounded. So many people dead, so many. And it's all because of Taoist Heavenspan. By this point, his hands were clenched tightly. Big Fatty Zhang's mood was sinking just as much. It was late into the night before they finished talking about the past and their current situation. Many tears had been shed, and they had sighed many times. Occasionally they laughed, and occasionally they would weep while laughing. Sometimes, it was like they were back in the ovens, back in the days without true worry or care. Back in those days, Big Fatty Zhang had been high-spirited and full of mettle. Back in those days, Bai Xiaochun had been proud and confident, and had dreamed constantly of being able to live forever. Many years had passed, and they were no longer the youngsters they had once been. They had grown up, and in that process, had come to find duty and responsibility weighing heavily on their shoulders. After the Heavenspan realm collapsed, Big Fatty Zhang said, "I did my best to search for our people. But as the saying goes, the words of the lowly carry little weight. I was one of the first to arrive here, and because of my skills in spirit enhancement, I managed to establish myself in the Vile Emperor dynasty. But I have little power. Xiaochun, I wasn't even free to leave this place and come find you. The only way I could have done it was to fly there myself. After all, the teleportation portals are all locked down." Although Big Fatty Zhang's voice was laced with bitterness, at this point, his face suddenly lit up. "Hold on, Xiaochun. I might not have much power, but I have been able to help some of the people of Heavenspan. Guess what? I know where Patriarch Spirit Stream is. And also Sect Uncle Li Qinghao. They've gathered a lot of disciples from the river-defying sect." When Bai Xiaochun heard this, he shivered, and reached out to grab Big Fatty Zhang's shoulder. Shaking physically, he said, "You know where Uncle Li is? And Patriarch Spirit Stream? And other disciples from the river-defying sect? Where are they?" Bai Xiaochun was almost certain that he had misheard. After all, despite extensive searching back in the Saint Emperor dynasty, he had come up completely empty-handed in terms of finding people he knew. "Yeah, I know where they are. But I was worried about revealing their location, so I never went to see them in person. However, I can tell you that they are in the safest place in this immortal domain." Big Fatty Zhang could tell how emotional Bai Xiaochun was getting, and he didn't hold anything back. He quickly went on to tell him everything he knew. "You never went to see them in person. That was smart. And safe. As long as they're alive, that's what matters. That's what matters. That's what matters." Bai Xiaochun had to force himself to remember to breathe. Eventually, he released Big Fatty Zhang's shoulder, and thought back to how Li Qinghao would often look at him with both sternness and love in his eyes. Suddenly, Bai Xiaochun's eyes welled with tears. "Uncle Li." It took a while for Bai Xiaochun to regain his composure. At that point, Big Fatty Zhang took another drink from his jug of alcohol, then hesitated for a moment before lowering his voice and saying, "Xiaochun, I discovered a monumental secret. I'm not sure if I should even say it out loud." Bai Xiaochun looked at him, clearly taken aback. He could see that Big Fatty Zhang seemed confused about what to do, as though he wanted to reveal what he knew, but at the same time, wanted to keep it a secret. If this were any other person, he would assume they were trying to be deliberately mystifying. But this was Big Fatty Zhang, and he knew that he wouldn't do that. Furthermore, considering the level of Bai Xiaochun's cultivation base, he was able to sense that Big Fatty Zhang's will was different from that of others. Although Big Fatty Zhang was still only a nascent soul cultivator, his willpower surpassed that of most demigod experts, and was close to that of a celestial. Back in the Heavenspan realm, Bai Xiaochun wouldn't have been able to tell. But as a celestial, he understood much more about how the larger world worked. Obviously, there was something special about Big Fatty Zhang, some inner quality of his that was related to will. It was almost as if he were blessed by will itself in some special way. It had been many years ago that Big Fatty Zhang began to perform spirit enhancements in accord with will. That had a lot to do with it. I wonder if that's why he began to dream of leaving the Heavenspan realm. Bai Xiaochun thought. With that, he waved his right hand, sending out some cultivation base power that added a further layer of concealment and protection to the spell formation protecting the embassy. Reaching out into Big Fatty Zhang's mind with divine sense, he said, "Tell me with your divine sense. I can guarantee that for the next 10 breaths of time, not even an Archean could eavesdrop on us." Big Fatty Zhang visibly relaxed, and without the slightest hesitation, explained himself via divine sense. "Xiaochun, I know a secret about the Vile Emperor. It's really hard to explain, and I'm not even sure how to put it into words. And I'm worried that telling you about it, even with the defenses you've set up, could lead to a disaster. If you want to know the details, the best thing would be for me to take you to see it in person. Then you'll understand." Big Fatty Zhang's divine sense operated with incredible quickness, perhaps because of his willpower. In only 10 short breaths of time or so, he explained as much as he could about the circumstances surrounding this secret. Back when he had arrived in the eternal immortal domains on Ghost Mother's battleship, spirit enhancement was something that no one in the eternal immortal domains had even heard of. As soon as Big Fatty Zhang's abilities became known, it caused a huge stir in the Vile Emperor dynasty. Even the Vile Emperor himself was pushed into a state of frenzied anticipation. He had Big Fatty Zhang perform numerous spirit enhancements to see the results. Afterward, he issued orders giving Big Fatty Zhang a high standing, but also, to assign him a mission. That mission was to perform a spirit enhancement on the shocking trident around which was coiled the bone dragon that housed Vile Emperor City. Because of that, Big Fatty Zhang came to have a special place in the Vile Emperor dynasty and became quite famous. However, Big Fatty Zhang knew his own limitations. When performing spirit enhancements on ordinary items, failures weren't anything he would worry about. But when it came to that spear, he knew that if he failed in the enhancement, the spear would suffer a major backlash. In fact, the worst-case scenario would involve the spear collapsing. And that would likely result in his own death. Therefore, Big Fatty Zhang held back. He told the Vile Emperor that he was only strong enough to perform a 5-fold spirit enhancement, and that it would take a full 60-year cycle to complete it safely. He was the only person in the Vile Emperor dynasty who could perform spirit enhancements, so there was no way for anyone to determine if he was telling the truth or not. Even if they suspected he was not, there would be no way to confirm it. Therefore, after some consideration, the Vile Emperor agreed. However, the people of the Vile Emperor dynasty continued to study spirit enhancements. And eventually, the Heavenspan realm collapsed, and its people were scattered everywhere. As it turned out, the Vile Emperor dynasty began to enslave them, all with the hope of cracking the secret of spirit enhancements. In terms of the secret Big Fatty Zhang wanted to tell Bai Xiaochun, it had something to do with the spirit enhancements he had performed on that trident. Up to now, he had taken the trident up to the level of a 3-fold enhancement. Every time he performed an enhancement, he would experience a vision, something that was apparently unique to him. Big Fatty Zhang's guess was that it had something to do with his spirit enhancement abilities. After all, not even the Vile Emperor had been aware of his visions. Bai Xiaochun could see how cautious Big Fatty Zhang was being, and how seriously he was taking the matter. Eyes flashing, he decided not to beat around the bush. "When can I go see it?" he asked. "Right now," Big Fatty Zhang replied. He had been keeping this secret in his heart for far too long, and hadn't dared to even think about it. It was a secret that was so significant that it could affect all of the eternal immortal domains. That was why he had almost immediately decided to tell it to Bai Xiaochun. He was worried that if one day he unexpectedly died, perhaps the secret would be buried in the sands of time. Another factor was that each time he performed another spirit enhancement on the spear, the vision would grow more difficult to see. "I bet that with 2 more enhancements, it will disappear for all eternity." Not even performing more enhancements on the spear would produce the vision. Without the slightest hesitation, he rose to his feet. Bai Xiaochun could tell that this was a matter of utmost importance. Masking both his aura and Big Fatty Zhang, he waved his hand, causing them to vanish and appear outside in Vile Emperor City. Big Fatty Zhang was very familiar with the city, and quickly led Bai Xiaochun along a little path that led to a remote palace deep in the valley. It was located in a sort of ravine right next to the huge trident, where there was a slight gap between the spear and the lands around it. This palace was the residence the Vile Emperor had given to Big Fatty Zhang, to make it easy for him to perform enhancements on the spear. Just outside of the palace was the huge spear itself. From here, it was possible to see the 3 silver designs that were evidence of the successful enhancements Big Fatty Zhang had performed in the past. At this point, Big Fatty Zhang didn't say anything. He just pointed at the spear. Were this any other person than Big Fatty Zhang, Bai Xiaochun would have hesitated at the suspicious nature of what was happening. But right now, he didn't hesitate to walk right up to the spear. As he neared, he could sense a fierce aura coming from the trident, as though it had slaughtered too many lives to even count. All of the hair on his body stood on end. It almost felt like he was about to descend onto a deadly battlefield. Thankfully, the trident was protected by a sealing mark that prevented most of that aura from escaping. Even still, only someone with a nascent soul cultivation base or higher would be able to get near it. Otherwise, it would have been difficult to even build Vile Emperor City on the bones that hung on the spear. "Do I need to actually perform a spirit enhancement?" he thought. His methods of performing spirit enhancements were different from others. But in the end, they all stemmed from the same general principles. When it came to high-level enhancements, he would have to use his turtle walk. And even for lower-level enhancements, it was generally much easier and simpler to just use the walk. But when it came to a mere 4-fold enhancement, he could do it on his own if necessary. After all, he was a heavenly necromancer who had learned his skills in the wildlands, which was the home of spirit enhancements. Reaching out, he summoned a 4-colored flame, and then carefully placed it onto the surface of the trident. Almost as soon as his hand made contact with the trident, the flame melted into it, and his expression flickered. In that moment, he heard an anguished scream in his head. "I refuse to accept this." I refuse to bring shame to my ancestor." Along with the scream came a shocking vision. Shockingly, he was looking at the vile emperor. Except, there wasn't just one vile emperor, there were two. They were currently fighting a battle to the death. The vision wasn't perfectly clear, but Bai Xiaochun could clearly see the lightning-like attacks, and then, one of the vile emperors fell in death. He died screaming, stabbed to death by this very same trident. By the time the trident was pulled out of his body, he was dead in body and soul. And then his body faded away. Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide, and his heart and mind were battered with tidal waves of shock. The enormity of what he was witnessing defied anything he could have imagined. Considering how nervous Big Fatty Zhang had been, he had been prepared for something momentous. But this went beyond all expectations. There were actually two vile emperors. They looked the same, but one was the real thing, and the other was an imposter. It was impossible to say how many years ago this event had taken place, but from the way the dying vile emperor had shouted about letting his ancestor down, Bai Xiaochun's intuition was telling him that he was not the imposter. Even as Bai Xiaochun stood there, completely and utterly shaken, the vision faded, as though whatever secrets were locked in the trident were being thoroughly transformed into ashes thanks to this fourth spirit enhancement. No future enhancements would reveal any further visions. As Bai Xiaochun slowly regained his senses, the shock in his heart made him completely forget about the spirit enhancement. He pulled his hand back, and the four-colored flame fell to the ground and sputtered out. The trident stood there, still and unmoving. He felt completely out of sorts, and was unable to quell the chaos he felt in his heart. As for Big Fatty Zhang, he had been unsure of whether or not Bai Xiaochun would experience the same vision, but considering his reaction, it seemed he had. The vile emperor was an Archean, a level that completely surpassed that of a celestial. His will was powerful to an unimaginable degree. If celestials could be likened to mountain peaks, then Archeans were like the clouds that floated above them. Their willpower could encompass entire immortal domains, could transform heaven and earth, and could drive countless hosts of living things completely mad. For some unknown reason, the real vile emperor had been unable to notify the world of the truth of his passing. And yet, before his death, he had succeeded in passing a bit of his consciousness into the trident that killed him. That fleeting wisp of consciousness had remained undetected by whoever it was that killed him, and was not something that people could find by examining the trident directly. Only performing a spirit enhancement, which would restructure the trident on a fundamental level, would result in dredging up that slight bit of consciousness and the memories therein. And thus, something which had remained secret for many years became known to Bai Xiaochun. After a very long moment passed, he forced himself to calm down, whereupon questions began to pop up in his mind that had terrifying implications. If the real vile emperor was killed, he thought, then, who exactly is the current vile emperor? And when precisely did it happen? How come something as monumental as the death of the vile emperor happened without anyone knowing? At this point, he looked up at Big Fatty Zhang, who had been standing there quietly the entire time. He could see the confusion and anxiety in Big Fatty Zhang's eyes, and at the same time, realized that his previous caution had been thoroughly justified. If the current vile emperor realized what he knew, the consequences would be too dire to contemplate. After another long moment passed, he left. He didn't want to stay with Big Fatty Zhang for too long. This sensitive matter was something that didn't just involve the two of them, but rather, the fundamental existence of the eternal immortal domains as a whole. By the time he got back to the main hall in the embassy, it was late. His two demigod subordinates greeted him, at which time he forced himself to put his thoughts in order. One of the demigods stepped forward and respectfully extended an invitation card. Exalted One, while you were in secluded meditation, the vile prince sent you several invitations. Apparently, someone noticed that Grandmaster Zhang came to visit you, as he yet again sent someone with an invitation. Exalted One, he has invited you to Vile Prince Mansion for a banquet this very evening. With that, the two demigods went on to explain more details about what had gone on while he was in seclusion. Bai Xiaochun looked at the invitation card, his brow slightly furrowed. He had spent most of his time as ambassador in seclusion, and had politely refused all invitations. However, the vile prince had sent numerous such invitations, and as Bai Xiaochun's two demigod subordinates had said, he had noticed that he had accepted a visit from Big Fatty Zhang. In that case, refusing more invitations would likely lead to complications. Whatever. I've been in Vile Emperor City for a while now, I guess I might as well go check out this vile prince. Having made his decision, he reached out and took the invitation card. Since the vile prince has sent so many invitation cards, why don't the two of you go with me? Of course, the two demigods didn't dare do anything but comply. Immediately voicing their assent, they left the embassy with Bai Xiaochun. The demigods led the way to a location on the skull of the bone dragon. By the time they arrived, the moon hung high, and the night felt deep and somber. As a celestial, Bai Xiaochun's every move and action was subject to observation. And since he had made no effort to be stealthy in any way, the people in Vile Prince Mansion knew he was coming. Before he arrived, dozens of individuals flew out of the ornate, luxurious mansion, the weakest of them being devas, and with 5 being demigods. As they neared, they all clasped hands and bowed formally to Bai Xiaochun. "Greetings, Ambassador Bai. After you, Ambassador Bai. Everyone in Vile Prince Mansion is eagerly awaiting your arrival." From their formality and respect, it was clear to see that the Vile Prince was taking Bai Xiaochun's visit very seriously. That was especially true considering who was standing outside the main entrance of Vile Prince Mansion. There were 7 people lined up, with one standing in front of them all. He was middle-aged, and dressed in a robe embroidered with dragons. Although he wasn't as domineering and impressive as the Vile Emperor, he looked very similar to him. At a glance, Bai Xiaochun knew without a doubt that this was the Vile Prince. Bai Xiaochun nodded in greeting from afar. The Vile Prince noticed the gesture, and in response, laughed heartily. "Ambassador Bai," he said, hurrying forward, "I sent so many unanswered invitations. If you refused this one, I might have just had to come visit you personally." Bai Xiaochun could immediately see how much younger the Vile Prince was than the Vile Emperor. He didn't appear sinister to the bones like the Vile Emperor, nor was he very domineering. He almost seemed to have mastered the smooth-faced demeanor of the people of the Saint Emperor dynasty. "Trying to intimidate the new guy, huh?" he thought coldly. "Blaming me for not coming to visit you earlier? Lousy prince. You don't count for crap." Although he didn't have a very good impression of the Vile Emperor dynasty so far, he was very proficient when it came to putting on a pretense of civility and interest. "How could I possibly inconvenience you by make you come visit me, Vile Prince?" he said. "You see, my cultivation base had reached a bottleneck, and thus, upon arriving, I was very anxious to get right to cultivation. Many apologies for all the delays." He ended with a slight chuckle. Considering how much higher his cultivation base was than the Vile Prince, that laughter, despite not being very loud, contained significant weight. In fact, it was more than enough to dissolve the domineering air contained in the Vile Prince's false courtesy. Eyes sparkling, and smile growing more radiant than ever, the Vile Prince clasped hands and said, "I only invited 2 individuals to my banquet this night, Ambassador Bai. Please, come in." With that, he escorted Bai Xiaochun into his mansion. Bai Xiaochun was very used to this sort of environment, and smiled broadly in return as he followed along. The 2 of them began to chat, and soon it was clear that neither were inferior to the other when it came to such arts. However, were it not for the fact that he had a high standing by birth, the Vile Prince would not have been able to keep up with Bai Xiaochun. Soon the underlings who were following them began to respect Bai Xiaochun more and more. As the highest-ranking prince in the Vile Emperor dynasty, it only made sense that the Vile Prince's mansion was far more luxurious than mansions of lesser princes. Upon entering, it was possible to see countless astounding decorative rock formations, as well as numerous streams and ponds. It felt like a place of spirits and immortals, and even a single intake of breath would stimulate the cultivation base to an astounding degree. Despite being a celestial, even Bai Xiaochun was impressed. "You have a nice place here," he said in all sincerity. "You flatter me, Ambassador Bai," the Vile Prince replied, chuckling. Clearly, he was feeling very pleased with himself. Looking over at Bai Xiaochun, he continued, "I really do have to offer profound thanks to your heavenspan realm, Ambassador Bai. After all, it's only because of the secrets of spirit enhancement that my mansion has been elevated to this state." He pointed at a decorative rock formation some distance away. "See that ornamental hill over there? I built it with ordinary immortal stones that I crafted into a spell formation. Then I scoured the Vile Emperor dynasty for Grandmaster Spirit Enhancers to work their magic on it. Although many of them failed at their task, the final result was worth it. In fact, all of the ornamental rocks here have 3-fold spirit enhancements." The Vile Prince seemed very interested in the subject of spirit enhancements, and as he led Bai Xiaochun toward the main hall of his mansion, he pointed out everything that had been enhanced. He seemed to be quite knowledgeable regarding spirit enhancement theory, prompting Bai Xiaochun to listen to what he said with some curiosity. So far, he hadn't met anyone in the eternal immortal domains who knew as much about the subject as the Vile Prince. "According to my understanding, there are 3 main ways that you heavenspan realm cultivators perform spirit enhancements. The first has to do with confidence, which is connected to will. The second is in accord with magical law, and by finding ingredients that can harness the energy of heaven and earth. The third, and supposedly the most orthodox of them all, is by relying on multicolored flame. And of course, people who can use multicolored flame are called necromancers. From what I hear, Ambassador Bai, in all of the Heavenspan realm, going back to the most ancient times, there was only ever one heavenly necromancer. The Vile Prince was gauging Bai Xiaochun's reaction, and when he saw the surprise on his face, he chuckled. At that point, he suddenly looked somewhat wistful. Unfortunately, it's a real pity that, despite all my research, I only ended up proving that spirit enhancements can only be performed by people with the blood of the Heavenspan realm in them. Without the power of that blood, even someone who has mastered all of the relevant skills will still fail. And even transfusing the blood into oneself will only provide a very limited ability. It's truly a blessing from the Eternal Mother to the descendants of the Arch-Sovereign. He sighed. During his speech, Bai Xiaochun was convinced that he could detect the smell of blood coming from the man. Frowning, he was about to say something when the Vile Prince suddenly turned to face him, his eyes sparkling. Ambassador Bai, the truth is that I asked you here today to propose a trade that I think you might be interested in. You have something that I want. Like what? Bai Xiaochun replied, forcing down his displeasure as he stood there, looking back at the Vile Prince. The Vile Prince licked his lips and looked Bai Xiaochun up and down, in much the same way that a lecherous sex addict of a man would stare at a beautiful woman. It instantly caused Bai Xiaochun's eyelid to twitch a bit. Ambassador Bai, I want your body. Bai Xiaochun's face instantly turned very grim, and his hackles rose. Swishing his sleeve, he snorted coldly and said, please behave yourself, Vile Prince. Clearly displeased, he turned to leave. Wait, Ambassador Bai, you misunderstand me. I have developed a bit of a hobby in collecting the fleshly bodies of cultivators. Calm down. Listen, if you agree, then I can arrange for another fleshly body to replace your current one. And I guarantee you'll be happy with the results. Considering the level of your cultivation base, it shouldn't be any problem for you to possess another body. And I have a huge collection, every one of them unique and perfect specimens. Apparently worried that Bai Xiaochun would refuse because of a misunderstanding, the Vile Prince waved his arms out, causing all of the ornamental rocks in the mansion to suddenly begin shining with bright light. As the light shone, the rocks began to turn translucent, making them look almost like ice. As that happened, it became possible to see corpses sealed within all of the rocks. There were men and women, old and young, beautiful and ugly, strong and weak. And yet, all of them, without a single exception, glittered like treasures in a museum. Bai Xiaochun had just been preparing to leave, but now he was rooted in place, his eyes wide as he looked around at all the corpses. His mind almost seemed incapable of catching up to how events were unfolding. Never could he have imagined that the Vile Prince would have a hobby like this. On the one hand, it seemed completely outrageous, but at the same time, it made Bai Xiaochun feel like he had just attained a deeper understanding of the world. I can't believe he actually likes collecting corpses and setting them up in his courtyard. The Vile Prince was clearly very pleased with how stunned Bai Xiaochun looked. Looking around proudly at his collection, he began to introduce them as surely as if they were the most priceless of treasures. See that one? That is a one-of-a-kind Ten-Yang body. It's a type of battle body that can allow a diva to fight a demigod. It's so strong that it's really difficult to put into words. Oh, and that one over there is even more amazing. It possesses the most spectacular powers of attraction you can imagine. Men with that type of body can capture the hearts of endless numbers of female cultivators. After some research, I found that such bodies emit shocking fluctuations that tug at the psyches of anyone of the opposite sex. Look at this old guy. Forget about how ancient he looks. Technically speaking, no one in the eternal immortal domains ever lived longer than him. He clearly had a demigod cultivation base, but his longevity surpassed celestials to a ridiculous level. I wasn't able to determine the reason, even after lots of research. As the Vile Prince went about his introductions, Bai Xiaochun looked around at the reactions of the other cultivators present. Considering how no one seemed surprised, it was obvious that this hobby of the Vile Prince's was no secret in the Vile Emperor dynasty. Bai Xiaochun looked back at all the corpses, and felt like his mind was spinning beyond control. Hair standing on end, he interrupted the Vile Prince's enthusiastic monologue to say, I got this body from my parents, Vile Prince. I'm afraid there's no deal to be made. I just realized I have an important matter to attend to. I'll take my leave now." With that, he began to back up. The Vile Prince immediately frowned in what appeared to be significant displeasure. Sorting coldly, he said, "If you don't want to make the trade, Ambassador Bai, that's fine. But there's no need to act so stuck up. We cultivators are supposed to defy the heavens. Our goal in life should be to achieve the great eternal Tao. The fleshly body is merely a vessel to carry the divine souls of cultivators through the river of time. The journey along that river is a long and terrifying one, and fraught with peril. If a better vessel is suddenly presented, one should take it. That is the best way to improve one's chances of achieving that great Tao. The tenacity and focus in the vile prince's voice left Bai Xiaochun a bit stunned, and in fact, some of what he said actually made sense. Ambassador Bai, as a celestial, you have experienced many things. I refuse to believe that you don't understand how sometimes it's necessary to replace the fleshly body that is our vessel in life. Only in that way can we save time and reach our ultimate goal, that great Tao. The vile prince was clearly pleased with how closely Bai Xiaochun was listening to him. After all, he was talking about his Tao, which he was completely confident would take him to that which was eternal. It's true that your fleshly body came from your father and mother. But you should think of that body as merely the first of many. Bodies are like magical items. Ambassador Bai, I refuse to believe that you still use the same magical items that you did when you first stepped into the cultivation world. Bai Xiaochun gasped slightly. Although he felt in his heart that the vile prince was incorrect, he spoke in such a decisive fashion that it seemed hard to question him. The vile prince suddenly tore open his clothing, revealing a body that appeared to have been stitched together from numerous other body parts. Ambassador Bai, look at this. See my left arm? It comes from the vile glory clan, and possess the power of sinister coldness. And my right arm is from the Clash Heaven Horde, and can release profoundly shocking divine abilities. I got my left leg from the Fiend Killers, and my right leg from the Dragon Herds. He was crisscrossed with scars, a sight that would be shocking to anyone who looked at him. Bai Xiaochun was completely shaken by what he was hearing. Never could he have imagined that a freakish person like this could exist in the world. His father permits all of this? He thought. Apparently, the vile prince was used to people reacting in this way, and could tell exactly what Bai Xiaochun was thinking. Smiling, he said, His Majesty the vile emperor initially opposed my Tao, but after enough time passed, he changed his mind. In fact, he approves of it now. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.